state calls Timothy Bledsoe to the stand.
Bring a cup of water with me.
Certainly. If you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may have a seat. All right, Ms. Acorn.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Timothy Bledsoe, Timothy, Bledsoe, Bledsoe.
And you're retired now, is that correct?
That's correct.
How were you previously employed?
I was employed by the West Virginia State Police as a West Virginia State Trooper from September of 1994 until April of 2022.
And are you still involved with West Virginia State Police at all?
Yes.
How so?
Prior to my retirement, I was asked by the staff at the West Virginia State Police Academy to periodically do a presentation to the training classes that are put on there for cadet training and basic officer training, and I do that from time to time as they schedule that.
During the course of your employment with the West Virginia State Police, did you have occasion to investigate a Natalie Cochran?
Yes, I did.
And is that the same Natalie Cochran that's on trial today?
That's correct. And she's seated here at defense counsel table with her co-counsel, Mr. Victor and Mr. Selden.
Your Honor, could the record please reflect that the witness has identified the defendant?
It shall so reflect.
Thank you. What did you investigate her for?
Initially, the investigation centered around a potential of financial crimes, and then as we continued that investigation, we also investigated the death of Michael Cochran.
Your Honor, I'm retrieving what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1. I would request permission to approach the witness.
Yes, you may do so.
Can I see that for a second? Oh, okay.
Were you present at the time that the events in State's Exhibit 1 occurred?
Yes, I was.
And have you reviewed State's Exhibit 1?
Yes.
Can you identify for us what that is?
Yes, this is the plea agreement signed and carried out in the district court for the Southern District of West Virginia, in which the defendant pled
I'm
guilty.
going to object this entire line of questioning. We're not retrying here the federal case.
Your Honor, this is simply a line of questioning to introduce the federal document of which the court has taken judicial notice into evidence.
For what relevancy?
It is relevant because it's going to prove that Michael Cochran did not know what was going on in the defendant's Ponzi scheme.
That document has nothing to do with Michael Cochran.
The stipulation of facts that is reflected in that document does not mention Michael Cochran, which goes to show that he did not know what was going on.
I'll overrule the objection. I'll permit it, and I'll preserve your exception, Mr. Victor. Go ahead. You may rephrase or re-ask the question, please, Ms. Aker.
I believe I asked you to identify State's Exhibit 1.
Yes, this is the plea agreement which was signed by the defendant involving the financial crimes in which she was charged in the federal court for the Southern District of West Virginia. She pled guilty.
And does that document accurately reflect the events as you recall them?
Yes, it does.
In that document, is there a stipulation of facts signed by the defendant?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, is Michael Cochran mentioned anywhere in that stipulation of facts?
No, he is not.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask to move State's Exhibit 1 into evidence.
I'm going to object on the same grounds that I objected before, the relevancy.
Have we dealt with State's Exhibit 1 already? It has not been admitted?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to admit it over objection. I'll preserve the defense objection and exception to the document.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Bledsoe, can you please tell us what you know about Michael Cochran?
He was 38 years old at the time of his death. He was married to the defendant. They shared a home here in Raleigh County in the Daniels area. Had 2 children together. I never met Michael Cochran personally, but through investigation and I think.
So I'm going to object based on lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, his personal knowledge was gained through his investigation.
Well, which is based probably on hearsay, and again, lack of personal knowledge.
Overruled. You may continue, please.
And through the investigation, we learned that Michael Cochran was someone who was very conscious of his physical fitness. He was into working out, possibly bodybuilding, and also was very conscious of his standing and reputation in the local community.
Was there any point in your investigation, I'll rephrase, did it ever appear to you as though Michael was questioning the legitimacy of Tactical Solutions Group?
That is a leading question. I object to that.
I think I have to sustain that objection.
You obtained a search warrant for the defendant's phone, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in reviewing that telephone, were there any text messages that caught your attention at any point?
Yes, numerous ones, particularly around late September of 2018, the text messages that we were reviewing as part of our investigation at that time.
Your Honor, I'm asking for 3 exhibits to be marked at this time that have been reviewed by the defense.
All right.
I believe these are 22 through 24.
Yes. Number 22 through 24, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages on the screen?
The 304-228-1321. That would be
Your Honor, could he speak into the microphone? I can't really hear him.
Okay.
sorry.
No problem.
The 1-304-228-1321 telephone number is identified as being the cellular phone number for the defendant, and the one titled Uncle Buster, I believe that was the uncle of the defendant, Charles Hawley.
And there were several text messages along these same lines, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about these text messages stands out to you?
The first text message is from the defendant to Uncle Buster. It says, "Good evening. After all your contracts pay out, I won't be able to invest them anymore. I will cut your checks as soon as they come in. I am very sorry. I wasn't transparent with Michael on all the contracts we had in the works." That's one of many demonstrations throughout the text message.
I'm going to object.
Sustained. That was unresponsive.
Could I,
Yes, you can follow up with a
Move to
question.
strike, Your Honor, that last answer.
Yes, I'll grant that. Ladies and gentlemen, disregard the last attempt to explain.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, why does that text message stand out to you?
Because the defendant is obviously communicating that she was not transparent with Michael about aspects of the business.
Now, these text messages are across a couple of pages, but did you identify the parties in these messages as well?
Yes, again, this is a defendant's phone, and it appears to be communications with her sister, Penny Carrico, who I believe has since been married and is now maybe Penny Lowry.
I'm just moving on to the same conversation to the top of the next page. Why does that text message stand out to you?
For the same reasons I stated on the previous, it's a very similar in context and has the same wording that Michael and I should have been, details with Michael and I should have been completely transparent with him. That's similar to the previous text.
I don't think the jury can read these texts. Can you, members of the jury?
Working on it.
Okay.
Hit the T until you can read.
Maybe you could assist Deputy Fry. We need to focus in.
Yeah, turn that light. Okay.
So bring down the house lights. Does that help at all or make it worse? Is that better? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to take that one away now. Doing my best to get it all on there. And finally, Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages?
Again, yes, that's the defendant's cell phone number, and also identified as the other phone number is identified as Wendy Poteet, which is the sister of the defendant.
What happened in September of 2018?
From our investigation, we learned that, and these texts are an example of how we learned that Michael Cochran discovered that there were aspects of the business, particularly related to the purchase or investment into contracts and the amount of money that investors were investing versus what he believed, what he had been told by the defendant. And more importantly, the promised return was much larger to those individuals than he had previously believed, and he was extremely upset by that.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I've got my exhibits all out of order.
Okay, take your time.
Your Honor, I'm now presenting what I would ask be marked as State's Exhibit 25,
Okay.
and all of these exhibits have been reviewed by the defense.
Can I just see it for
Sure.
for a second? I don't have these numbers memorized.
Right.
This will be state exhibits number 25.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm also going to ask the State's Exhibit 26 be marked.
Very well.
Number 26, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages?
Yes, that's communication by cell phone between the defendant and Michael Cochran.
Can you see this, members of the jury?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
And what to you is the significance of these text messages?
The defendant appears to be relaying to Mr. Cochran.
Well, I'm sorry, Your Honor. If it appears to be, then the witness is speculating.
Sustained. You can rephrase, please, Ms. Akron.
What about these text messages was pertinent to your investigation?
Based on our investigation and reviewing these text messages, they are reflecting amounts, large amounts of money that are being presented to Michael Cochran in the context that they will be being paid to their business as part of their contracts with the federal government.
And are these the same parties as the previous text messages?
Yes.
What about Michael's response was significant to your investigation, if anything?
Yes, based on our investigation and again reviewing these texts, he was, and based on the information that I testified previously about what he had found out, he was trying to find out.
Well, Your Honor, the witness is speculating. The witness is stating something based on hearsay. I object to this.
Well, I think it's based on his investigation, and I think it's proper. I'll allow it. You may continue, sir.
Judge, may we approach on that?
Sure.
to my attention by Mr. Heinzman.
And what exactly was brought to your attention?
He had received information from one of the troopers at the Beckley Detachment, Sergeant Alan Marsh, and that information indicated that there was potentially financial crimes or a crime or crimes being committed by the defendant.
And what steps did you undertake to begin your investigation?
A wide array of things, just gaining all the background information that we could. Some of it was, obtained through open source. The business had a website that we were able to look into. But at the same time, doing an investigation of that nature, it's important to, especially if it's something that you believe is still ongoing, you want to make sure that you don't, tip your hand. And so we tried to be as covert as possible in exploring the information into the financial crimes. And we were able to...
I'm going to object. This is non-responsive. It's we. The question was, what did you do? Because I don't want any answers based on hearsay.
Okay, Lieutenant Bledsoe, if you'd confine your answer and testimony to the activities that you engaged in yourself.
Yes, sir.
You can continue if you can phrase it within yourself.
Yes, I participated in the investigation in that. I was a participant in assisting in obtaining grand jury subpoenas to obtain documentation, interviewing witnesses, potential witnesses, and just the collection of any and all known documentation or information that we could possibly find related to the allegation.
And just so we're clear, financial crimes were not the only allegation that you investigated, right?
At the beginning, yes, it was. But as the financial crime investigation continued, then I also was involved in investigating the death of Michael Cochran.
And in investigating the death of Michael Cochran, what steps did you personally undertake?
Very similar to what I stated earlier. And also met with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for West Virginia once I learned that Mr. Cochran had not underwent autopsy upon his death.
Did you conduct interviews during your murder investigation?
Yes.
Did you obtain search warrants?
There was a search warrant obtained, but the basis for that affidavit was based on the investigation of the financial crimes.
Were you ever aware of an audit on the Cochrans?
No.
Were you aware of allegations of an audit?
Yes.
And by whom were those allegations made?
The defendant.
Your Honor, I'd ask this be marked as State's Exhibit.
Number 27, Your Honor.
Very well.
Now, as far as this is concerned, I only want to focus on this text message. Who is this text message coming from?
The defendant, excuse me.
So, did you ever uncover any evidence that an audit occurred?
Absolutely not.
What was the audit used as an excuse for?
For the delay in repaying investors or the
Your Honor,
business.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. We're back to the money laundering trial.
Your Honor, the point of
There's-
this is to
has
prove
nothing
that
to do with
Mr.
our-
Cochran...
Wait a minute, you all are talking at the same time.
Yes, sir.
Let me hear from Mr. Victor first. Go ahead.
The answer and the question and the answer suggested the same thing that the court has sustained the objection to already. That is, we're retrying the financial case, and we should and calling for all kinds of speculation. And we don't need to do this. This has nothing to do with murder trial. This is irrelevant.
Now, Ms. Aker.
Your Honor, the purpose of this and the relevance is to prove the state's motive, which is that Michael Cochran did not know that a Ponzi scheme was being run, and that is why we report that the defendant killed him.
I'll allow it. The objection's overruled. Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Bledsoe, are you aware of anyone by the name of Betsy Britland?
I'm familiar with that name, yes.
Can you tell us who she is,
No, I cannot.
and why is that?
Because through this investigation, I learned that that person, the way that it was being presented, was not actually a real person or employed in the manner in which it was also being portrayed, or she was also being portrayed to be employed.
Now, was she ever mentioned in the defendant's communications with anyone?
Yes, numerous times.
And who was she purported to be by the defendant?
An employee with the Defense Finance Accounting Services, which was commonly seen throughout documentation reviewed in this investigation as DFAS.
What does DFAS stand for?
Defense Finance Accounting Service, I believe.
What's the significance of the government shutdown that began in December of 2018?
It was a legitimate government shutdown, as most of you may remember, but it also provided that the business of the defendant was not able to provided an excuse as to why the business could not do government contract work or receive payment from the government for contract services.
And do you recall learning of an incident that occurred with Michael at BB&T during that month?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Through the investigation and interview of witnesses, I learned that Michael Cochran had.
Again, it's based on hearsay and some third-party statement, Judge.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I learned that the Cochrans were sent a letter by BB&T Bank here in Beckley, and the nature of that correspondence was to inform them that their bank accounts with BB&T were going to be closed. And in response to that, Mr. Cochran went to BB&T Bank personally and was very irate, very upset, to the point that his close friend, Chris Davis, had to be summoned to the bank to calm him down.
I'm going to object to any characterizations of irate and that the witness is speculating at this point. The witness doesn't
Overruled.
know.
I'll allow it. Pose another question, please, Ms. Akron.
Yes, Your Honor. Through your investigation, what was your understanding of the status of the Bank of America account as of the morning of February 6th?
that it was zero balance and that there was no information to suggest that any funding or funds were going to be coming into that account in the future.
And the Cochrans were going to do some work on that account that morning, right?
That is my understanding from this what I learned from this investigation, yes.
We've heard a lot of talk about Michael allegedly using supplements and possibly even steroids. Did you ever locate any evidence to confirm steroid use?
No, it did not.
And we previously introduced a bottle with the FBI labeled enclomiphene citrate. Where did you receive that bottle from?
I recovered that bottle from the residence of Edward and Donna Bolt. Mrs. Bolt is Michael Cochran's mother, and Edward Bolt is his stepfather.
And did the Bolts tell you where they got that bottle from?
Yes, they told me that they were provided that bottle by the defendant after Michael Cochran's death.
Do you have any reason to believe that Michael was suffering from any sort of major medical event leading up to February 6th?
Oh, that calls for medical conclusion. He's not entitled to make that opinion.
Sustained.
I'll withdraw it, Your Honor. From your understanding, what was the general health status of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran the morning of February 6th?
Through the investigation, I learned that the defendant was possibly ill that morning and had sought treatment at the Access.
Why don't the court give me a continuing objection to any of this?
I think that would be appropriate. The court will afford the defense a running objection to all of this testimony, but I'll permit it. I'll preserve the defense exceptions in full. You may continue now, Lieutenant, but
Could you ask me that question again, please?
Sure. What was your understanding of the general health status of both Mr. and Mrs. Cochran the morning of February 6th?
Again, my understanding of the condition of Michael Cochran and the defendant that morning is based upon what I learned through this investigation, that the defendant was apparently ill that morning and had went to Access Health Clinic to seek medical treatment. And initially that morning, from the information that I've reviewed, Michael Cochran appeared to be well, but the information also indicates and supports that over the course of the morning his physical condition deteriorated.
Did the defendant go to the doctor that morning?
Yes.
Are you aware if Michael went to the doctor that day?
No.
Or that morning, I should say.
No.
Through your investigation, especially of the defendant's phone, did you determine if any medications were received that day?
Yes. It indicated that the defendant was given a shot of promethazine, I believe, and possibly promethazine tablets, which was significant when I saw that.
Why was that significant to you?
I'm going to object to that on the other grounds. He's not a medical expert. He cannot testify to it.
Your Honor, there's no indication that he's testifying to medical expertise until we have his answer.
well, we don't know what his answer might be, so I'll allow it, and we'll test the waters.
Why was that significant to you?
It was significant because through this investigation, I'd learned that Michael Cochran had was documented to have a severe allergy to promethazine.
What were the Cochrans supposed to do that morning?
It's my understanding through the review of the information in this investigation that the Cochrans had initially scheduled a flight to fly to Virginia, but that flight had been canceled early in the morning on February the 6th.
And why was that flight canceled?
It was my understanding that the flight was canceled due to the defendant's illness.
Were both the defendant and Mr. Cochran home that entire morning?
Not initially, no. They had both been out doing different things at some point that morning.
Where did Michael go?
He had went to Starbucks that morning.
And then he returned home?
Yes, that's my understanding.
What were the Cochrans supposed to do when they took their flight that morning?
As my understanding, they were supposed to meet with Mr. Nexon at the Bank of America.
And we previously heard Jennifer Davis testify that she had insulin sent to the defendant's home. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Why is that important to you?
Well, it's important for a number of reasons. Throughout the investigation, I had not come across any information that anyone in the Cochran residence was diabetic. Also, in an interview that I had conducted with the defendant, she had informed me that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of his bodybuilding regimen. And the fact that she had been to Access Health that very morning, and I'm sure could have requested insulin there.
Judge, please, I'm going to object to all of this speculation and all of this commentary on what my client could have, should have done. Please, would you instruct the jury to disregard this
Yes,
nonsense?
the jury is instructed to regard the last part of this witness's response, please.
Do you recall why the defendant needed the insulin that morning?
As I recall from the text messages with Jennifer Davis, it was something to do with some type of medical treatment that she was supposed to be undergoing.
What was that medical treatment for?
I believe it was something related to cancer treatment.
And throughout the entire course of your investigation, did you ever uncover any evidence that the defendant had cancer?
No.
What did you determine happened next that morning in the Cochran household?
At some point, Mr. Cochran suffered a sudden illness, and to the point that he had collapsed in the home.
I object to this, Your Honor, to the display of this inflammatory picture. The witness doesn't know anything about the position of the body or the location of the body when this act allegedly happened. I object to it.
I haven't asked him those questions, Your Honor, and I wasn't planning to. I actually would like to know if the witness is familiar with this photograph and who took it.
All right, I'll permit that. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I am familiar with this photograph, and
I object to the word unfortunately. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I object to any commentary by this officer.
All right, just answer the question, please, Lieutenant Bledsoe.
yes, I'm familiar with that photograph. It was taken by the defendant.
And how do you know it was taken by the defendant?
It was recovered from her cell phone.
Is it your understanding that that time she was the only other person in the residence besides Michael?
Yes.
Now, you spoke with the defendant several times, is that correct?
That's correct.
What did she tell you happened to Michael that day?
She provided contradictory information about what had happened over the course of 3 separate
Judge,
conversations.
may we approach on this?
Sure.
I objected to the word contradictory, and I will ask the court to, or contradictory statements, and I'll ask the court to instruct the jury to disregard that statement.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please disregard the witness's last statement pertaining to contradictory statements.
You interviewed the defendant on 3 different occasions, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have any recollection of the dates of those interviews?
Yes. I believe the first interview took place on or about April the 8th of 2019. The second interview was on or about May 7th of 2019. And the third was on the following day, May the 8th, 2019.
And did anyone accompany the defendant at any of those interviews?
The first interview was actually done in person with the defendant, and yes, her mother was present. The second and third interviews were done by telephone.
During the first interview, did the defendant tell you or give you her recollection of what happened to Michael the morning of February 6th?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Yes. She said that, as I stated earlier, they were in the residence together, and that Mr. Cochran had suddenly went into the kitchen, and she had heard a noise in there. I think she said it was a thud. She gave the time reference in that interview of 10 a.m. that morning. She went into the kitchen, and Mr. Cochran was in the floor, and that she had discovered a bottle of enclomiphene citrate on the kitchen counter when she went into the kitchen.
And did she also provide a recollection of events of February 6th during your second interview?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that for us?
Yes. At that time, she said that the morning of February 6th, that when she and Michael returned home, that they had sat together for approximately an hour, and that Michael Cochran was doing the best that he had ever done in his life, and that not long after that, he had went into the kitchen, threw up in the sink, and fell and hit his head on the granite countertop and ended up in the floor.
And did she tell you where in the house they were prior to Michael getting up and getting sick?
I believe they were she told me they were in the living room area. And also in that interview, I recall that she stated that she had recovered the bottle of enclomiphene citrate hidden in a cabinet instead of sitting on the kitchen counter as she previously stated.
And lastly, what was her recollection of events of the morning of February 6th during your third interview with Mrs. Cochran?
During that interview, she indicated that, again, they had gone separate ways that morning and had returned home, and that upon returning home, Mr. Cochran had been sleeping on the couch for approximately 45 minutes to an hour, and that when he awoke shortly after that, he went into the kitchen and had collapsed. And also she introduced that in that interview that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of a bodybuilding regimen, and that he readily kept insulin and needles in the home for the purpose of using that in his bodybuilding. I asked her if she had ever injected Michael as part of that to assist him. She indicated that she had not, that he injected himself. And I asked her if he had a common injection site that he preferred to use, and she listed or recited different areas on the body, but the one that stood out to me was she said that his back, or in the back, and that just seemed odd to me.
Now, we know that Michael passed away shortly after that. After he passed away, did TSG continue to operate?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
Through investigation and collection of records and interviewing of witnesses, the business continued, and the defendant continued to try to solicit investors to come into the business. I believe additional investor or two did come into the business.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. This is post-murder, supposedly. That is irrelevant to this trial.
Your Honor, it's relevant because it proves that Mrs. Cochran was the one that was running the business, not Michael.
Objections overruled.
In addition to that, the defendant had also went to several local high schools in Raleigh County because it was nearing graduation season, and that she had attempted to present scholarships to students who were graduating. And
Judge, I'm going to object to it now. Now we're retrying the financial case again.
Your Honor, my answer
This
is
has
the same.
nothing to do with what may have happened months before, weeks before, or months before.
Did you care to respond, Ms. Akron?
Your Honor, my response would still be that this is simply being offered as proof that Michael Cochran was not the one that was running this business. And that is our motive for the defendant killing him.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but we have never objected to the fact that that my client was part owner of the business. So, and now the alleged victim is dead. So, business is being run by whoever is left in this business. And so I object on the relevancy of all of that information to the trial at hand.
I'll preserve your objection, but for the reasons stated by the state, I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled.
she had presented those scholarships, which turned out to be worthless. And then in addition to that, she continued to provide the same excuses to investors that.
I'm going to object to this editorializing, the constant editorializing by this witness.
Your Honor, we can move on.
Something is
Yeah,
wrong.
I'll sustain this objection.
There was a federal magistrate that issued a search warrant for the Cochran residence in this case. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you the affiant on that?
I was.
Did you participate in the search of the defendant's home?
I did.
And after the search occurred, did you review the property receipt for that search with the defendant?
I did.
Are there any corrections that you want to make to that property receipt?
Yes, there was one that I noticed in the days following the search warrant while reviewing the documents and things related to the search. I realized that one item had not been properly documented on the property receipt. It had been properly identified and photographed during the execution of the search warrant and packaged and taken from the scene, but it was not listed by the agent who was completing the inventory at the scene. It was
What procedure did you follow in reviewing the property receipt with the defendant?
At the conclusion of the search warrant, I asked the defendant to join me in the kitchen area at the table so I could go over the property receipts with her. There were 4 of them, and explain to her what exactly they were and that those were her copies. I believe her mother was present for that as well. And got the document out and for the property receipt for the home that we were in. And when I identified that, the defendant immediately began going through the pages. There's multiple pages to that document. And she stopped and identified an item with her finger and said, this right here, this bottle of insulin, I keep this here at my home for a neighbor's child who's diabetic. And I said, okay, thank you for that information. And we concluded the search warrant and left.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.